No co-op partners to lean on, no squad to bail you out, just you and 30 of the most unforgettable single-player experiences ever made. I'm talking about heart-wrenching stories, brutal boss fights, and worlds so alive you'll forget to blink. Pragmata. There's something deeply unsettling about waking up alone on the moon with nothing but a child android for company. And Capcom leans into that isolation with everything it's got. Pragmata drops you into the boots of Hugh, a stranded astronaut whose entire investigation team has vanished, leaving him bonded to Diana, a mysterious young AI who might be the only thing standing between him and a very lonely death. What starts as a survival story quickly spirals into something far stranger, as the lunar facility around them reveals secrets about rogue AI uprisings and a version of Earth that may no longer want them back. This is where Pragmata gets really interesting. Combat isn't just about shooting, it's about hacking. Diana cracks enemy defenses with rhythm-based puzzle sequences, while Hugh lays down suppressing fire, forcing you to split your attention between two very different skill sets in real time. Atomic Heart. Imagine if Soviet propaganda posters had a fever dream, and that fever dream decided to murder you with a robotic ballerina. That's the gorgeous, unhinged energy Atomic Heart brings to the table. Set in an alternate 1955, where the USSR cracked the code on advanced robotics decades early, this is a utopia dripping with retrofuturism, red stars, and just beneath the surface, a rot that's about to boil over. You play as Major Nikevsky, sent to investigate why the country's obedient robot workforce has suddenly decided humanity is the enemy. What makes Atomic Heart sing is how it refuses to sit still. One moment, you're in a brutal melee scrap with a glove that can freeze, electrocute, or straight up telekinetically launch enemies. The next, you're solving environmental puzzles in a sprawling, surreal facility that feels like BioShock got lost in the Ural Mountains. Final Fantasy VII. Some remakes play it safe. This one tore up the blueprint, set it on fire, and rebuilt Midgar from the ground up, with more heart, more spectacle, and more sheer audacity than anyone had a right to expect. Final Fantasy VII takes the opening slice of the 1997 classic, Cloud, a burnt-out ex-soldier turned mercenary, joining an eco-terrorist cell to blow up a reactor draining the planet's life force, and expands it into a full, emotionally loaded epic adventure on its own. The combat is the real triumph here. A hybrid system that blends real-time action with strategic active-time battle commands, letting you swing swords in real time while still pausing to plan spells, abilities, and limit breaks like a true tactician. It's fast, flashy, and deep enough to reward mastery without ever feeling overwhelming. But it's the character work that lingers. Cloud, Tifa, Barret, and Aerith feel more human than ever. Their dynamic crackling with humor, tension, and genuine warmth against the neon-soaked industrial sprawl of Midgar's slums. Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2. Most RPGs let you be a hero from the jump. Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2 makes you earn it, one clumsy sword swing and one botched conversation at a time. And that's exactly why it hits so hard. Picking up right where the first game left off, you're back in the muddy boots of Henry, a blacksmith's son thrust into a world of nobles, bandits, and brutal medieval politics. This sequel doubles down on everything that made the original a cult favorite, expanding into two massive, gorgeously realized regions of 15th century Bohemia that feel less like a game map and more like a living, breathing slice of history. What sets this apart from the fantasy RPG crowd is its commitment to grounded realism. There's no magic here, no dragons, just steel, sweat, and consequence. Combat is a genuinely demanding sword fighting system that punishes button mashers and rewards patience, footwork, and reading your opponent. Metaphor ReFantazio. From the minds behind Persona comes a fantasy epic that dares to ask a wild question. What if you had to campaign your way onto a throne while monsters were trying to eat your face? Metaphor ReFantazio drops you into a richly imagined world, fractured by prejudice and political chaos after the king's assassination throws open the succession to a public vote. You're an outsider with no name, no status, and a wildly unpopular dream of becoming king anyway. Armed armed with nothing but conviction, a talking book, and a small army of unlikely allies willing to bet everything on you. Atlus takes everything it perfected with the Persona series and reforges it into something bolder. The calendar-based social sim structure is back, but now it's fused with a gripping road trip narrative and a battle system that blends turn-based tactics with real-time positioning for encounters that feel weighty and kinetic rather than static. The archetype system, essentially this world's answer to Persona's iconic classes, lets you completely reshape your party's combat identity on the fly, encouraging constant experimentation. Nier Automata. On the surface, it's androids fighting robots for a ruined Earth. Underneath, it's one of the most quietly devastating meditations on purpose and what it even means to be alive that gaming has ever produced. Nier Automata follows 2B, a combat android of the human resistance, alongside her scanner support partner 9S, as they wage war against a machine army in humanity's long-abandoned name. And by the time the credits roll multiple times, in multiple radically different ways, you'll understand why people describe this game less as a story and more as an experience that rewires how you see everything that came before it. Combat blends Platinum Games' signature hack-and-slash fluidity with bullet hell sequences and even top-down dungeon crawling, shape-shifting genres as effortlessly as it shapeshifts perspective, forcing you to replay the story from wildly different angles to actually understand it. That structure isn't a gimmick, it's the entire point, peeling back layers of an emotionally shattering narrative about war, identity, and existential despair that most games wouldn't dare touch. Yoko Taro's direction is deliberately strange, unsettling, and achingly beautiful all at once. God of War. Kratos spent 3 games ripping Greek gods limb from limb, so what do you do for a follow-up? You strip him down to almost nothing, hand him a son he doesn't know how to love, and drop them both into the frozen, unforgiving wilds of Norse mythology. God of War isn't a reboot so much as a rebirth, trading the button-mashing chaos of old for something slower, heavier, and far more personal. Kratos wields the Leviathan axe now, instead of the Blades of Chaos, and every throw and recall of that weapon feels like a statement, controlled fury instead of unchecked rage. The genius of this game is Atreus. What could have been a forgettable escort quest becomes the emotional spine of the entire experience, as a father who spent his life running from who he was tries desperately not to pass that darkness on to his son. The camera never cuts away, one continuous shot for the entire game, which makes every conversation, every fight, every quiet boat ride across the lake feel unbroken and intimate in a way most games never attempt. Combat itself is a masterclass, blending axe-throwing precision, rune attacks, and genuinely terrifying encounters against trolls, Draugr, and gods who'd very much like Kratos dead. Dispatch. Every superhero story loves the big fight, the explosions, the last-minute saves, the glory. Dispatch is far more interested in what happens the Monday morning after, when someone still has to answer the phones. You're thrown into the chair of a dispatcher, managing a team of C-list, wildly dysfunctional heroes who'd rather bicker about parking spots than save the city. And it's your job to send the right idiot to the right emergency before everything falls apart. It's superhero fiction filtered through workplace comedy, and the combination is far funnier and far sharper than it has any right to be. What makes Dispatch click is how seriously it takes its choices without ever losing its comedic pulse. Every Dispatch decision ripples outward, shaping relationships, office politics, and the fragile trust holding this ragtag team together, all while your own arc, a former hero, trying to prove he's still worth something behind a desk, quietly unfolds in the background. The writing is the real star here. Sharp, character-driven dialogue that nails the specific chaos of managing people who are simultaneously superpowered and completely unqualified for their jobs. Batman Arkham Knight. How do you end a trilogy that redefined what superhero games could be? You burn Gotham to the ground and let Batman fight for it one last time. Arkham Knight is Rocksteady's swan song for the Dark Knight, and it goes out swinging. Scarecrow has unleashed his fear toxin over the entire city, evacuating civilians and leaving Gotham a lawless war zone, crawling with the worst of Batman's villains, all under the command of a mysterious new criminal calling himself the Arkham Night. It's bigger, darker, and more personal than anything the series attempted before, culminating in a finale that finally, fully confronts what years of trauma have done to Bruce Wayne. The free-flow combat that made this series iconic returns sharper than ever, chaining brutal counters and takedowns into combos that make you feel like an unstoppable force of nature. But the real headline edition is the Batmobile. Love it or hate it, tearing through Gotham's streets and transforming on the fly into a tank mode battle machine to demolish drone armies adds a whole new rhythm to traversal and combat that the previous games never had. Resident Evil 4. Few games are brave enough to remake a title widely considered one of the greatest of all time. Fewer still actually pull it off. Resident Evil 4 does more than survive that pressure, it thrives under it, taking Leon Kennedy's descent into a nightmarish Spanish village and rebuilding it with modern combat, modern horror, and just enough reverence for the original to feel like coming home. 6 years removed from the Raccoon City outbreak, Leon's simple rescue mission for the president's daughter spirals into something far darker the moment the villagers start swarming with pitchforks, chainsaws, and eyes that are very much not okay. What made the 2005 original a genre-defining classic was its perfect balance of tension and empowerment, and this remake nails that same tightrope walk while modernizing everything around it. Inventory management is tenser, parries and knife mechanics add a real skill ceiling to encounters, and the horror elements that were softened in the original get turned back up to genuinely unsettling levels. Ganado hordes are smarter, more coordinated, and more terrifying, forcing you to actually think about crowd control instead of just clearing rooms on muscle memory alone. Marvel's Spider-Man. Plenty of games have tried to capture the feeling of being a superhero. Insomniac's Spider-Man is one of the very few that actually nails the feeling of being Spider-Man. That specific, dizzying joy of flinging yourself off a skyscraper and trusting a thread of webbing to catch you before the pavement does. This isn't an origin story either. You're playing an experienced Peter Parker, years into the mask, juggling a struggling personal life with an ever-growing villains as a mysterious new criminal organization called the Demons throws New York into chaos. Traversal alone would be enough to make this game a standout. The web swinging is so fluid, so responsive, so genuinely joyful that simply getting from point A to point B becomes an attraction in itself, giving you an unbelievably dense, vibrant recreation of Manhattan to swing through. But the combat holds up its end too, a kinetic mashup of gadgets, acrobatics, and environmental takedowns that makes you feel like you're improvising a fight scene rather than executing a combo list. What elevates it beyond spectacle, though, is the writing. A genuinely touching exploration of Peter's relationships with Aunt May, Mary Jane, and a slow-burn Mr. Negative plot that pays off with real emotional weight. Devil May Cry 5. A demonic tree has rooted itself in the middle of Redgrave City, and it's up to 3 wildly different devil hunters, Nero, Mysterious V, and Dante, to cut it down before it consumes the world. Each of them plays like an entirely different game stitched into one glorious package, and that variety is exactly what makes this such a rewarding, replay-hungry experience. Nero's Devil Breaker arms give him a toolkit of gimmicky, satisfying gadgets that snap on and off mid-combo. V commands a trio of demonic familiars from a distance in a completely unique summoner playstyle, and Dante, a one-man army switching between 4 stances on the fly, each with its own weapons, rhythms, and combo potential deep enough to fuel speedrun communities for years. The genius of Devil May Cry 5 is how it teaches you to actually engage with that depth, with a style rank system that rewards creativity and punishes button mashing, turning every fight into a performance rather than a chore. Visually, it's a showcase for Capcom's RE engine, all gorgeous lighting and over-the-top demonic spectacle, backed by a soundtrack that kicks into blistering rock and metal the second things get serious. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. 9 years after slipping into a coma, Big Boss wakes up with a horn, a bionic arm, and a mission of unrelenting revenge. And what follows is the most ambitious stealth game Kojima Productions has ever built. The Phantom Pain trades the corridor-based sneaking of past Metal Gear entries for sprawling open world across Afghanistan and the Angola-Zaire border, letting you approach every outpost, base, and adequate with an almost overwhelming amount of tactical freedom. Sneak in silently, call in an airstrike, ride in on horseback, and disguise as a cardboard box. What makes this stealth sandbox sing is how reactive it is to your own playstyle. Enemies adapt to your habits in real time. Get too fond of headshots, and they'll start wearing helmets. Favor night raids, and they'll deploy floodlights and night vision troops. That living, breathing AI ecosystem, paired with mother base management that lets you recruit captured soldiers into your own private army, gives every mission a strategic layer most open world games never bother with. The Last of Us Part 1. Some games earn masterpiece status the moment they release. The Last of Us earned it and then kept it for over a decade, and this remake exists to make sure the next generation understands exactly why. 20 years into a fungal pandemic that's reduced America to a patchwork of quarantine zones and infected hellscapes, hardened smuggler Joel is tasked with escorting a teenage girl named Ellie across the country. A routine job that quietly, devastatingly, becomes the most important thing he's ever done. What made this game a genre-redefining moment back in 2013 was its total commitment to character over spectacle, and that hasn't dimmed one bit. Joel and Ellie's relationship unfolds with a rawness and specificity that most prestige television can't even match, let alone most games. This remake rebuilds every frame of that journey from the ground up, with drastically improved facial animation, environmental detail, and combat that finally feels as tense and desperate as the story demands, all while preserving the pacing and beats that made the original untouchable. Infected encounters remain nerve-shredding. Human enemies feel genuinely dangerous and reactive, and the quiet moments, a giraffe in a ruined city, a hummed lullaby, still land with the same gut-punch weight they always did. Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. Nathan Drake spent 3 games chasing lost cities and dodging collapsing ruins by the skin of his teeth. A Thief's End asks what happens when that reckless life finally catches up to him. Retired, settled, and quietly restless behind a desk job, Drake's peace shatters the moment his presumed dead brother Sam resurfaces with a desperate offer. One last hunt for the greatest pirate treasure in history, hidden in the legendary lost colony of Libertalia. It's a story about legacy, brotherhood, and the pull of a life you swore you'd left behind. And it might be Naughty Dog's most mature, emotionally grounded script yet. Traversal has never felt better, with a grappling hook and piton that add real verticality and momentum to exploration, while the sprawling, gorgeous environments from Scottish rain-soaked estates to Madagascar's sun-drenched jungles are some of the most visually stunning set pieces ever put in a game. Vehicular sequences, dynamic gunfights that let you approach encounters with genuine tactical freedom, and quieter, character-driven chapters all blend into a pace that never feels repetitive. Grand Theft Auto 5. Over a decade later, Los Santos is still one of the most alive, most obsessively detailed open worlds ever built. And that's a wild thing to say about a game this old. GTA 5 hands you not one protagonist, but 3. Michael, a retired bank robber drowning in suburban dissatisfaction, Franklin, an ambitious repo man looking for a way out of the streets, and Trevor, an unhinged, terrifying force of chaos who exists purely to remind you that this world has no guardrails. Switching between them mid-mission, sometimes mid-heist, isn't just a gimmick. It fundamentally reshapes how heists, chases, and story beats unfold. The single-player campaign is a satirical crime saga that takes aim at everything from Hollywood excess to reality TV culture, but it's the sandbox itself that keeps people coming back years later. Los Santos and Blaine Blaine County remains staggeringly dense, full of hidden strangers, side activities, and systemic chaos that emerges naturally from just existing in this world. Heist missions stand as some of the best mission design Rockstar has ever produced, letting you plan approaches, recruit crews, and watch elaborate jobs unravel in spectacular, often hilarious fashion. Persona 5 Royal. If style were a weapon, the Phantom Thieves would be the deadliest crew in gaming, and Persona 5 Royal makes sure you feel that in every single menu transition, every battle cutscene, every needle drop of its impossibly cool jazz pop soundtrack. You're a transfer student in Tokyo, saddled with an unfair criminal record who stumbles into the power to enter the corrupted hearts of society's worst. Corrupt teachers, abusive politicians, predatory adults hiding behind the mask, and steal the twisted desires fueling their cruelty. It's a superhero story dressed up as a school sim, and the disguise works beautifully. Royal takes the already excellent Persona 5 and sharpens nearly everything, adding a new semester, a new confidant, Kasumi, an entire new palace, and quality of life improvements that smooth out the original's pacing issues. The core gameplay remains a genre-defining balancing act. By day, you're managing a calendar of relationships, part-time jobs, and social links that all feed back into combat strength. And by night, you're diving into stylish, turn-based dungeon crawls built around exploiting enemy weaknesses and fusing personas into devastating new forms. Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Few trilogies ask players to carry the weight of an entire galaxy's fate across 3 games, remembering every choice, every death, every relationship along the way. And Legendary Edition finally lets you experience that saga the way it deserves. As Commander Shepard, you're thrust into a race against an ancient cosmic threat called the Reapers, rallying an unlikely alliance of humans, aliens, and outright enemies to stand a chance at survival. This collection bundles the original trilogy plus over 40 pieces of DLC, remastered for modern hardware, into the definitive way to experience one of gaming's most beloved space operas. What made Mass Effect legendary in the first place was its unprecedented commitment to consequence decisions you make in the first game ripple forward, reshaping conversations, alliances, and even who lives or dies dozens of hours later in the third. Your crew isn't just a roster of companions. They're some of the most fully realized characters, each with arcs worth investing in, whether you're mediating a centuries-old species rivalry or talking a teammate back from the edge. Legendary Edition smooths out the rougher combat of the earlier entries, refreshes visuals across the board, and lets the entire saga flow as one continuous story rather than 3 disconnected chapters. Resident Evil 2. Raccoon City's fall from grace is one of survival horror's defining moments, and this remake doesn't just retell it, it drags you through, with a level of dread the 1998 original could only dream of achieving. Rookie cop Leon Kennedy and college student Claire Redfield arrive in town on the exact worst night possible, as a viral outbreak turns the streets into a zombie-infested nightmare. Trapped together in the Raccoon City police station, they'll each carve their own separate path toward survival, uncovering the horrifying truth behind Umbrella Corporation's experiments along the way. Capcom rebuilt this from the ground up, with a fixed over-the-shoulder camera and modernized controls that trade the original's tank-like movement for genuine third-person tension. And the result is a masterclass in atmosphere. Flickering lights, groaning zombies that refuse to stay down even after multiple headshots, and ammo scarce enough that every encounter forces a real risk-reward calculation. The real star of the show is Mr. X, a hulking pursuer who stalks the police station on his own schedule, turning familiar hallways into anxiety the moment you hear his footsteps. Elden Ring. From Software built its reputation on punishing, meticulously crafted linear worlds, then blew the doors off everything with Elden Ring, taking that legendary difficulty and dropping it into a fully open world designed with fantasy legend George R.R. Martin. You're the Tarnished, a nobody exiled from the lands between, called back the moment the Elden Ring shatters and its guardian demigods descend into madness fighting over the pieces. Somewhere out there is is a path to becoming Elden Lord, but the lands between will make you bleed for every single step of it. What makes Elden Ring a real landmark is how naturally Souls-like combat translates into open-world exploration. Instead of a linear gauntlet of bosses, you're free to wander in any direction, stumbling onto crumbling castles, sunken ruins, and legacy dungeons in whatever order your curiosity dictates. That freedom fundamentally changes the series' famous difficulty too. Stuck on a brutal boss, you can simply leave, level up elsewhere, or find an entirely different path forward instead of banging your head against the same wall. Hogwarts Legacy. For 25 years, fans of the wizarding world could only imagine what it'd actually feel like to walk those halls, sling spells in the corridors, and finally get sorted for real. Hogwarts Legacy is the game that finally delivers on that fantasy in full. Set in the late 1800s, decades before the events fans know best, you play a late-arriving fifth-year student with a mysterious, ancient, magical ability, thrown into a growing conspiracy involving goblin rebellions and forgotten dark magic that threatens the wizarding world itself. It's an origin story built entirely from scratch, and it earns its own identity fast. The real draw here is simply existing in this world. Hogwarts itself is a staggering achievement of design, a living, breathing castle packed with moving staircases, secret passages, house common rooms, and portraits that actually react to you, all rendered with a density that rewards just wandering and getting lost. Combat surprises too, evolving from basic spellcasting into a flashy, combo-driven system once you unlock the dark arts and other powerful spells, letting you build a playstyle that ranges from noble duelist to borderline dark wizard. Ghost of Tsushima. There's a particular kind of beauty in watching red maple leaves swirl around you as you draw a katana against an entire Mongol patrol. Ghost of Tsushima understands that beauty better than almost any game ever made. It's 1274, and the first Mongol invasion of Japan has just torn through Tsushima Island, leaving samurai Jin Sakai as one of the only survivors of a slaughter that should have killed him too. To save what's left of his home, Jin has to abandon everything his samurai code taught him about honorable combat and become something new entirely, a ghost, striking from shadows the Mongols can't see coming. That central tension between honor and necessity runs through everything, from the story's quiet, character-driven, emotional core to the combat itself, which lets you switch between honorable, stance-based swordplay and the sneaking, poisoning, assassination tools of the ghost. Sucker Punch clearly poured everything into atmosphere. This might be one of the single most gorgeous open worlds ever crafted. All windswept fields, golden forests, and haunting Shinto shrines, with a wind mechanic that literally guides your compass instead of a UI marker cluttering the screen. Duels against named Mongol commanders play out like something out of a samurai film, tense standoffs resolved in a single, decisive strike. The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt. Nearly a decade later, and studios are still trying to catch up to what CD Projekt Red pulled off with this one. The Witcher 3 puts you in the boots of Geralt of Rivia, a Witcher monster hunter navigating a continent torn apart by war, superstition, and creatures that lurk in every forest and swamp. But the real hunt at the center of it all is deeply personal, tracking down Ciri, his adopted daughter, and a living weapon prophesied to reshape the entire world before the otherworldly Wild Hunt gets to her first. What separates this game from nearly everything else in the genre is the sheer density of great writing packed into every corner of it. Side quests here aren't filler. They're some of the best short stories in the medium, tackling grief, prejudice, and moral ambiguity with a maturity most main campaigns don't even attempt. Monster contracts turn Geralt into a proper detective, reading environmental clues and brewing potions to counter whatever beast he's hunting, while the world itself, from the swamps of Velen to the sun-drenched vineyards of Toussaint in the Blood and Wine expansion, remains staggeringly detailed and alive. Crimson Desert. Pearl Abyss built its reputation on Black Desert's obsessive detail, and Crimson Desert feels like everything that studio has learned poured into a single, sweeping, cinematic adventure. You play as Cliff, a mercenary captain trying to piece his shattered Greymane faction back together on the war-torn continent of Pywell, where political betrayal, ancient ruins, and a looming supernatural threat all collide. It's a story soaked in grit and consequence, less chosen one fantasy, more a mercenary just trying to keep his people alive in a world that keeps finding new ways to test him. Combat is where this game separates itself from the open world. Brutal, weighty, and choreographed with a physicality that makes every axe swing, parry, and grapple feel bone-crunching. Closer to an action game than a typical RPG. Traversal matches that ambition too, with dynamic climbing, horseback combat, and gliding all stitched seamlessly into a massive, seasonally shifting world that ranges from scorched wastelands to snowy mountains and the unsettling abyss lurking beneath it all. Red Dead Redemption 2. Few games understand the weight of a dying way of life like Red Dead Redemption 2 does, and even fewer are brave enough to spend 60+ hours making you feel every ounce of that weight before the story even lets you catch your breath. As Arthur Morgan, a loyal enforcer for the outlaw Vanderlinde gang, you watch the American frontier close in around you, federal agents and bounty hunters tightening the noose as the age of outlaws quietly, inevitably comes to an end. This isn't a story about winning. It's a story about reckoning with who you've been, and Arthur's slow, devastating arc toward redemption is one of the finest character studies gaming has ever produced. Rockstar's obsession with detail reaches an almost absurd level here. Horses have individually simulated testicles that shrink in cold weather. That's the kind of studio we're dealing with. But that same fanatical commitment to realism extends to a world that feels breathtakingly alive. Combat is deliberate and weighty rather than flashy, forcing you to slow down and actually inhabit this world rather than speedrun through it. It's a slow burn by design, demanding patience most games wouldn't dare ask for, but the emotional gut punch waiting at the end makes every single hour worth it. Cyberpunk 2077. Few games have had a redemption arc quite like this one. A rocky launch that nearly buried it, followed by years of relentless overhauls that turned Cyberpunk 2077 into one of the finest RPGs of its generation. You're V, a mercenary outlaw scraping by in Night City, whose life gets turned inside out the moment a botched heist leaves the digital ghost of legendary Johnny Silverhand, played with unhinged charisma by Keanu Reeves, literally living inside your head, slowly overwriting your mind while you race against time to get him out. Night City itself is the real showstopper, a vertical, neon-drenched metropolis layered by class and corporate greed, every district oozing its own distinct identity, from the corporate gleam of city center to the lawless sprawl of Pacifica. Character building leans hard into real cyberpunk fantasy, letting you wire your body full of cybernetic augments, hack enemies' brains from across a room, or go full guns-blazing, chrome-plated mercenary, depending on your build. But it's the writing that ultimately elevates this above the genre's usual trappings. Morally messy side quests, a tragic core relationship between V and Johnny, and multiple wildly different endings that actually reflect the choices you made along the way. Stellar Blade. Humanity's last stand shouldn't look this good, but Stellar Blade proves that a punishing, precision-based combat system and jaw-dropping visual spectacle aren't mutually exclusive. You play as Eve, a member of humanity's final strike force sent back to a ruined, alien-infested Earth to reclaim the planet from the monstrous Natiba that drove mankind to near extinction. What starts as a straightforward reclamation mission quickly unravels into something far more layered, as Eve uncovers secrets about Earth's downfall that call everything she's been told into question. Combat is where Shift Up really flexes its muscle, a tight parry and dodge focused system clearly influenced by the best of the genre, demanding precise timing and rewarding aggressive, skillful play over button mashing, with beast counters and burst attacks that make every encounter against the game's nightmarish Natiba designs feel like a tense, deliberate dance. Boss fights in particular are the highlight, huge, grotesque set pieces that test everything you've learned in the moment-to-moment combat against enemies with real personality and menace. Between its demanding combat, striking art direction, and a mystery worth unraveling, Stellar Blade announces Shift Up as a real contender in the action genre. Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Every year, a mysterious, godlike figure known as the Paintress wakes up, paints a number on a monolith, and everyone that age or older simply ceases to exist. That's the horrifying premise powering one of the most striking RPGs to come out of nowhere in years. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 follows the latest expedition sent to end this cycle once and for all. A group of doomed volunteers marching toward near certain death against against a foe who can erase them with a single brushstroke, in a world dripping with Belle Epoque France-inspired beauty and melancholy. What makes this game an instant standout is how it reinvents turn-based combat for people who thought they'd outgrown the genre. Every attack, whether you're dishing it out or receiving it, demands real-time reactions, with parries, dodges, and perfectly timed counters layered directly into traditional menu-based commands. It transforms combat from a passive numbers game into something genuinely tense and skill-driven, while still rewarding the strategic party building and ability planning turn-based fans love. Visually, it's a gorgeous, blending crumbling Gothic architecture with surreal, dreamlike enemy design that feels unlike anything else on shelves right now. Black Myth Wukong. Chinese mythology has never gotten a AAA action game quite like this. Black Myth Wukong reimagines the legendary journey to the West through a lens of jaw-dropping spectacle and punishing, meticulously animated combat. You play the Destined One, a monkey spirit warrior retracing the mythic footsteps of Sun Wukong himself, venturing through crumbling temples, mist-shrouded mountains, and nightmarish underworlds to uncover the truth buried beneath centuries of a legend. It's ambitious in scope and outspoken about its cultural roots, and that is exactly what makes it stand out in a crowded genre. Combat draws obvious inspiration from the Souls-likes, but carves its own identity through Wukong's shape-shifting toolkit, transforming into enemies you've defeated, summoning clones to overwhelm foes, or wielding a massive staff with stances that shift between speed and raw, bone-crushing power. Boss fights are the true centerpiece, towering mythological creatures animated with a fluidity and grandeur that rivals any action game on the market, each one a spectacle as much as a combat gauntlet. Game Science's attention to detail extends to the world itself, recreating real Chinese architectural and natural landmarks with staggering fidelity, giving every region a distinct, almost sacred sense of place. Baldur's Gate 3. There's a reason this game broke brains across the internet with its sheer, unrelenting commitment to letting you do literally anything. Baldur's Gate 3 might be the most reactive RPG ever built. Infected with a mind-altering parasite that threatens to turn you into a tentacled monster, you're forced into an uneasy alliance with a band of equally cursed companions, racing against your own transformation while a much larger, much darker conspiracy unfolds around you. It's Dungeons and Dragons rendered with a fidelity that finally does the tabletop fantasy justice. What makes Baldur's Gate 3 a phenomenon is how seriously Larian takes player agency. Nearly every object is interactable, nearly every solution is viable. Whether that means talking your way out of a fight, seducing a god, or just setting the entire battlefield on fire because you felt like it. Turn-based combat translates D&D's rule set beautifully, full of environmental tactics, elevation, and consequence for every spell and attack roll. But it's the character writing that elevates this into legendary territory. Companions like Astarion, Shadowheart, and Gale are so richly written, so reactive to your choices, that entire communities have formed just discussing their arcs. And that's a wrap on 30 of the most unforgettable single-player journeys you can strap yourself into right now. Drop a comment below which game on this list is calling your name first. Smash that like and subscribe button if you're not subscribed yet. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.